Agent Derek Mitchell of ICE observed Michael Johnson, a black man in his early 40s, filling his truck at a deserted gas station. He then motioned for his team, agents Kevin Torres and Amanda Brennan, to position themselves. The moment they confirmed Johnson was entirely alone, with no bystanders present, the three agents demanded proof of his legal status. When Lieutenant Johnson presented his Ohio driver's license and his official police identification, confirming his 17-year tenure and supervisory role, they feigned acceptance and departed, their body cameras recording their exit. Subsequently, they deliberately deactivated all three cameras before turning back to violently apprehend Johnson. During the arrest, they subjected him to racial epithets and declared his badge held no significance due to his race. Johnson was transported to an ICE detention facility where his phone and personal effects were confiscated, and he was confined to a cell for 6 hours. Unbeknownst to them, Johnson's wife had been tracking his phone and had already alerted his captain. Before we proceed, could you please indicate the city or country from which you are viewing this? Share it in the comments below. We appreciate knowing our audience's locations. If you believe that pumping gasoline as a black individual should not be considered a crime or warrant suspicion, please like this video and subscribe. Michael Johnson had just finished placing the last of his grocery bags into the rear of his Ford F-250 pickup truck at the Riverside Shopping Center. It was 3:45 in the afternoon on a Saturday, and he had promised his wife, Denise, and their two children, Maya, who was 12 years old, and Marcus Jr., who was 9 years old, that he would be home by 4 o'clock to assist with preparations for their family dinner. At 42 years of age, Johnson had served as a police officer for 17 years, with the last 5 of those years spent as a lieutenant overseeing a unit of 12 officers in the city's eastern precinct. Today, he was dressed in casual civilian attire, jeans, a gray t-shirt, and sneakers, appearing no different from any other father running weekend errands. As he settled into the driver's seat and checked his fuel gauge, the needle was hovering just above empty. Johnson glanced at the gauge. The Sunoco station was a mere 2 miles away on his route home, and stopping now would add only 5 minutes to his journey. He pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the gas station, completely unaware that 3 federal agents had just noticed him from across the street. Derek Mitchell, 34 years old and with 6 years of service at Immigration and Customs Enforcement, was seated in the driver's seat of an unmarked white SUV bearing government plates. He watched the shopping center parking lot with the calculated patience of a predator. Over his tenure, he had developed what he termed an instinct for identifying undocumented immigrants. His 2 partners sat beside him, Kevin Torres in the passenger seat and Amanda Brennan in the back. Both were younger agents who had learned to follow Mitchell's directives without question. When Mitchell observed Johnson loading groceries into an expensive pickup truck, something in his mind was triggered. A black man, an expensive truck, a suburban neighborhood. Mitchell's jaw tightened as he watched Johnson drive away. "Follow him," Mitchell stated quietly, engaging the engine. Torres glanced at him. "Did you see something?" "Just follow him," Mitchell repeated. They shadowed Johnson's truck at a distance, observing as he pulled into the Sunoco gas station at the intersection of Riverside and Madison. The station featured 8 pumps arranged in 2 rows. However, at 4 o'clock on a Saturday, the location was completely deserted. No other vehicles were present, nor were there any customers inside the convenience store. Only Johnson pulled up to pump number 4, exited his truck, and reached for the gas nozzle. Mitchell surveyed the surroundings meticulously. An empty parking lot, no pedestrians, no witnesses. He looked at Torres and Brennan. "No one's around. Let's move." Johnson had just inserted his credit card and begun pumping gas when he noticed the white SUV pull into the station behind him, effectively blocking his truck. 3 individuals emerged, clad in tactical vests emblazoned with the word ice across the chest. Johnson's stomach tightened. As a police lieutenant, he recognized the tactical implications immediately. Federal agents positioning themselves strategically, cutting off escape routes. But why would ICE be approaching him? Mitchell walked directly toward Johnson, with Torres and Brennan fanning out on either side, forming a triangular formation that boxed Johnson in against his truck. Mitchell's hand rested casually near his sidearm as he stopped 3 feet away. "Afternoon," Mitchell said, his tone flat and official. "I'm Agent Mitchell with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. I need to see proof of citizenship." Johnson stood there, holding the gas nozzle, utterly bewildered. "Excuse me?" "Proof of citizenship?" Mitchell reiterated. "Documentation showing you're legally in this country." Johnson felt the familiar knot in his chest that surfaced whenever he experienced racial profiling, but he maintained a calm and measured tone. "I'm a U.S. citizen. Why are you asking me this?" Torres stepped closer. "We don't need to explain our enforcement actions. Show us your papers." Johnson was aware of his rights. He understood this was profiling, but he also recognized that 3 federal agents had him surrounded in an empty gas station, and an escalation would likely not end favorably. "I don't carry my birth certificate around with me," Johnson stated carefully, "but I have my driver's license." "Let's see it," Mitchell commanded. Johnson slowly reached for his back pocket, withdrew his wallet, and extracted his Ohio driver's license. He handed it to Mitchell, who examined it with exaggerated scrutiny, checking the photograph, the name, and the address. Johnson's information was all present. Michael Johnson, local residential address, just 4 blocks away, valid until 2027. Mitchell handed it back without any discernible expression. "We asked for proof of citizenship, not a driver's license." Johnson felt anger surge, but he suppressed it. "I just came from the grocery store. Do you expect me to carry my birth certificate everywhere I go?" Brennan spoke for the first time. "If you can't provide proof of citizenship right now, you're getting arrested." The words hung in the air. Johnson realized these agents were not going to abandon this. They were seeking something from him, some justification for this stop. He was cornered and alone with no witnesses. This situation could deteriorate rapidly. He made a decision. "I'm not just a citizen," Johnson stated clearly. "I'm a police lieutenant with the city police department. I have my badge to prove it." All 3 agents exchanged glances. Mitchell's expression shifted to a blend of disbelief and amusement. "Sure you are." "I can prove it," Johnson insisted. Mitchell's smirk widened. "Then prove it." Johnson reached back into his wallet and pulled out his official police identification card. It displayed his photograph, his badge number, and his rank clearly printed. Lieutenant Michael Johnson, East Precinct. He held it up so all 3 agents could see it. The smirk vanished from Mitchell's face. Torres leaned in for a closer look. Brennan's eyes widened slightly. The identification was unequivocally legitimate. The official city police department seal, proper formatting, laminated credentials. This was not a counterfeit document. It was genuine. Mitchell took the card from Johnson's hand and studied it intently. His face had become carefully neutral, but Johnson could perceive the tension in his jaw. Mitchell returned the card without comment. "You're free to go," Brennan said quietly. The 3 agents turned and began walking back toward their SUV. Johnson exhaled deeply, feeling the tension recede from his shoulders. He turned back to the gas pump, watching the numbers climb as fuel filled his tank. It was over. They had seen his badge and retreated. He would be home in 10 minutes. However, Johnson then heard footsteps behind him. He turned to see all 3 agents had halted about 15 feet away. Their backs were to him as they walked toward their vehicle, their body cameras mounted on their chests, facing forward, recording their departure. They appeared to be professional, by-the-book agents leaving a routine check that had yielded nothing. Then, with a synchronized movement, all three agents reached up to their body cameras and pressed the power button. The small red recording lights extinguished. Johnson's blood ran cold. Mitchell turned around first. His expression had completely transformed. The veneer of the professional federal agent was gone, replaced by something ugly and raw. Torres and Brennan turned with him, and all three began walking back toward Johnson. "You know what, though?" Mitchell said, his voice now different, harsher, more malevolent. "You think that badge makes you belong." Johnson's hand tightened on the gas nozzle. "What are you doing?" "I showed you my credentials." Mitchell stepped close, infringing upon Johnson's personal space. "You're black. Nothing can change that. So, you don't belong here." Before Johnson could respond, Torres grabbed his arm and yanked him away from the pump. Johnson stumbled, attempting to break free. "This is illegal. You saw my badge." Brennan moved in from the other side, seizing his other arm. They slammed Johnson against the side of his truck, pinning him there. The gas nozzle fell from his hand, clattering onto the concrete. "Badge don't mean shit," Mitchell declared, his face inches from Johnson's. "You're still just another black man who thinks he's better than he is." "I'm a police lieutenant," Johnson shouted, struggling against their grip. "You're assaulting a police officer." Torres wrenched Johnson's arm behind his back. "Shut up!" Johnson felt the cold metal of handcuffs snap around his wrists. He looked around desperately. The gas station remained deserted. No cars, no witnesses, no one to observe the unfolding events. "This is false arrest. I have rights." Mitchell leaned in close, his voice a low hiss. "Rights? You don't have rights. You're coming with us." They dragged Johnson toward their SUV. He planted his feet, attempting to resist, but 3 against 1 with his hands cuffed behind him left him helpless. They shoved him into the back seat and slammed the door. As the vehicle pulled away from the gas station, Johnson twisted to look back through the rear window. His truck sat abandoned at Pump 4, groceries still in the bed, the gas nozzle lying on the ground. His phone was in his pocket, but his hands were cuffed. His family was waiting for him, and he was being abducted by federal agents who had just deactivated their cameras to make him disappear. 25 minutes later, the SUV pulled into the ICE detention facility on Marshall Boulevard. Johnson was hauled inside through a side entrance, past processing desks, and into an intake area. An officer at the desk looked up. "New detainee," Mitchell announced. "Suspected immigration violation." "I'm a police lieutenant," Johnson stated loudly. "My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a U.S. citizen. This is illegal detention." No one responded. They processed him as if he were any other detainee. They took his phone, his wallet, his keys, his watch, his police badge. Everything that identified him as Lieutenant Michael Johnson was placed into an evidence bag. They walked him down a hallway lined with holding cells and shoved him into cell number 7. The metal door slammed shut. The lock clicked. Johnson grasped the bars. "I need to call my captain. I have a right to a phone call." A guard walked past without acknowledging him. "I'm a police officer," Johnson yelled. "You can't hold me without cause." Silence. Johnson sank onto the metal bench in his cell. 6 hours. That's how long he would sit there in his civilian clothes in a concrete cell, treated like a criminal. All because 3 ICE agents saw a black man pumping gas and decided he didn't belong. Michael Johnson sat on the cold metal bench in holding cell number 7, staring at the concrete walls that had become his world for the past 3 hours. He had requested a phone call 6 times. Each time, the guards informed him that processing was not yet complete. Each time, they walked away before he could press the issue. Johnson was a police lieutenant with 17 years of experience, and he understood precisely what was transburing. They were deliberately stalling, hoping he would simply vanish into their system as countless others had before him. At his home, 4 blocks away, Denise Johnson checked her watch for the 15th time. It was 7:30 in the evening. Michael had departed at 3:45 to pick up groceries nearly 4 hours prior. Their daughter Maya sat at the kitchen table, occupied with her homework, while 9-year-old Marcus Jr. played video games in the living room. Both children inquired every 20 minutes when their father would return with the food for dinner. Denise had attempted to call Michael's phone 11 times. The initial few calls rang through to voicemail. The subsequent 8 calls went directly to a message stating the phone was unavailable. Something was amiss. Michael invariably answered her calls. Always. Even when he was engaged in a case or handling an emergency, he would text her back within minutes. 4 hours of silence was uncharacteristic of him. She tried to conceive of plausible explanations. Perhaps his phone had died. Perhaps he had encountered a colleague and they were catching up. Perhaps there had been an accident on the road and he was stuck in traffic. However, none of these rationalizations felt correct. Her husband was unfailingly dependable. If he were going to be late, he would find a way to inform her. By 8 o'clock, Denise's concern had escalated into genuine fear. She opened her phone and accessed the location-sharing application. She and Michael had established it years ago for safety reasons, primarily so she could track him during potentially dangerous calls. She tapped on his name and waited for the map to load. The pin appeared on her screen, and her breath hitched. Michael's phone was indicating a location on Marshall Boulevard. The address sent a chill down her spine. The ICE detention facility. She stared at the screen, refreshing it twice to ensure there was no error. The pin remained stationary. Her husband's phone was located within an immigration detention center. Denise did not hesitate for another second. She scrolled through her contacts and found Captain Rodriguez, Michael's commanding officer and one of his closest friends on the force. She pressed call and waited through 2 rings before Rodriguez answered. "Denise, hey, what's going on?" Rodriguez inquired, his voice relaxed as if he had been watching television. "Captain, I need your assistance," Denise replied, her voice trembling. "Michael left to get groceries at 3:45 this afternoon. He hasn't returned. He's not answering his phone. I checked his location, and it shows he's at the ICE detention center on Marshall Boulevard. I don't understand what's happening." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Rodriguez spoke again, his voice had undergone a complete transformation. "ICE? Are you certain?" "I'm looking at it right now on my phone," Denise confirmed. "His location hasn't moved in hours. Captain, why would Michael be at an ICE facility? He's a police lieutenant. He's a citizen. This makes no sense." Rodriguez was already in motion. Denise could hear him grabbing his keys, his footsteps quick and purposeful. "I'm heading there right now. I'll find out what's going on and call you back immediately." "Please hurry," Denise pleaded. "I'm frightened." "I'll get him out," Rodriguez assured her. "Whatever this is, I'll handle it." He hung up and drove directly to the ICE facility, arriving at 8:45 in the evening. Rodriguez entered through the main doors, wearing his police captain's uniform, his badge prominently displayed on his chest. The intake officer at the front desk looked up as Rodriguez approached. "I'm Captain Rodriguez with the City Police Department," he stated firmly. "I'm looking for one of my officers, Lieutenant Michael Johnson. I have reason to believe he is being held here." The intake officer was Kevin Torres, one of the agents who had apprehended Johnson. Torres recognized the name instantly, and his expression remained completely impassive. "We don't have anyone here by that name." Rodriguez stared at him. "Check again. Lieutenant Michael Johnson. He would have been brought in sometime this afternoon." Torres feigned a glance at his computer screen. "No one by that name in our system." Rodriguez pulled out his phone and showed Torres the location map, with Michael's phone clearly pinging from inside this building. "That's not possible. His phone's location is showing he's inside this facility right now. He has to be here." Torres did not even glance at the phone. "Our system says otherwise. Perhaps his phone location is inaccurate." Rodriguez felt his anger beginning to boil. "His phone is not wrong. I know he's here. Bring him out now." "Sir, I'm telling you, we don't have anyone by that name," Torres stated with practiced indifference. "Then explain why his phone is transmitting from inside your building," Rodriguez demanded. Torres shrugged. "I can't explain that, but we don't have him." Rodriguez leaned forward, his voice dropping to a tone that was both cold and menacing. "Listen to me very carefully. If you're holding one of my officers without proper cause, you are initiating a federal incident. I will contact the FBI, I will contact the Justice Department, and I will inform every news outlet in this city that ICE is making American citizens disappear. Now check your system again and tell me the truth." Torres's confident demeanor faltered slightly. He cast a glance toward the hallway where the holding cells were situated. Then he looked back at Rodriguez. The captain was not bluffing, and Torres knew it. If this situation escalated into a media scandal, if the FBI became involved, everything they had done that day would be exposed. Torres picked up his phone and made a brief call. Rodriguez could not discern the conversation, but he observed Torres's body language shift from defensive to uncertain. After a minute, Torres ended the call and looked back at Rodriguez. "Let me check with my supervisor," Torres said quietly. "Perhaps someone with a similar name came in." "Not someone with a similar name," Rodriguez countered. "Lieutenant Michael Johnson, my officer, who has been missing for 5 hours." Torres disappeared into a back office. Rodriguez stood at the desk, his hands clenched into fists. If they had harmed Michael, if they had hurt him, Rodriguez vowed to ensure that every single individual involved would face retribution. 5 minutes later, Torres returned, accompanied by Derek Mitchell. Mitchell maintained the same practiced, neutral expression. "Captain Rodriguez," Mitchell stated, "there may have been some confusion. We might have someone matching that description in holding." Rodriguez's gaze turned icy. "Might have. You either have my lieutenant or you don't." Mitchell shifted uncomfortably. "We detained someone earlier today for suspected immigration violations. The individual claimed to be a police officer, but we needed to verify his credentials." "For 5 hours?" Rodriguez responded incredulously. "He told you he was a lieutenant. He showed you his badge. You could have called our station and verified his identity in 5 minutes. Instead, you locked him up and pretended he didn't exist when I came looking for him." Mitchell had no response to this accusation. "Bring him out," Rodriguez commanded. "Right now." Part 3. The Reveal. They brought Michael Johnson out 20 minutes later, and Captain Rodriguez felt an overwhelming surge of rage the moment he saw his lieutenant. Johnson was still in his civilian clothes, his jeans and t-shirt now wrinkled and soiled from his time in the cell. His wrists bore red marks where the handcuffs had been excessively tight. His eyes, though weary, burned with anger. 6 hours he had been incarcerated in that cell for the simple act of pumping gas while black. "Lieutenant, are you all right?" Rodriguez inquired. Johnson's voice emerged, hard and controlled. "They arrested me at a gas station, Captain, after I presented them with my driver's license and my police badge. Their body cameras were deactivated, and I was told my badge held no significance due to my race. Subsequently, I was confined to a holding cell, and my identity verification was refused, despite providing your direct contact number." Rodriguez turned to Mitchell, his gaze radiating an intensity that could have liquefied steel. "You apprehended a police lieutenant after scrutinizing his credentials," he stated. Mitchell attempted to assert his authority. We had justifiable grounds to suspect his identification might be fabricated. Fabricated, Rodriguez echoed, his tone deliberately slow. You believed the official police department insignia of a lieutenant within your own jurisdiction was counterfeit. Consequently, instead of making a single telephone call to confirm its authenticity, you held him for 6 hours. Mitchell remained silent. Return all his possessions, Rodriguez commanded. Every single item immediately. Johnson was handed a plastic receptacle containing his mobile phone, wallet, keys, timepiece, and his police identification. His phone displayed 43 missed calls, predominantly from Denise, several from Rodriguez, and a number from other officers at the precinct. Johnson's hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he reinserted his belongings into his pockets. For the initial few minutes of the journey, Rodriguez drove Johnson home in complete silence. Then Johnson broke the quiet, his voice subdued but resonant with a chilling fury. They were fully aware of their actions, Captain. They surveyed the vicinity to ensure no other individuals were present at that service station. They waited until I was entirely alone. Then they surrounded me and demanded identification as if I were some common offender. I presented my driver's license. They dismissed it as insufficient. I displayed my badge. They examined it, confirmed its legitimacy, and began to depart. Rodriguez listened intently, his jaw muscles visibly tensing. Their body cameras were capturing their departure. Johnson continued, professional, by the book. Then, simultaneously, all three of them raised their hands and deactivated their cameras. I witnessed them do it. They switched those cameras off, then they returned and assaulted me. Mitchell confronted me directly and informed me I was unwelcome because of my ethnicity. They declared my badge was meaningless. They handcuffed me, placed me in their vehicle, and transported me to that facility as if I were some dangerous criminal they had just apprehended. They deliberately deactivated their cameras, Rodriguez stated, his voice strained with indignation. They understood that their impending actions were unlawful, Johnson interjected. Therefore, they ensured there would be no evidence. Subsequently, at the facility, when I informed them I was a police lieutenant, when I implored them to contact you to confirm my identity, they simply disregarded me. They stripped me of everything that affirmed my status as a law enforcement officer and confined me to a cell as if I were inconsequential. Rodriguez steered into Johnson's driveway. Denise rushed from the front entrance and hurried towards the vehicle. Johnson alighted, and his wife embraced him tightly, holding him with all her strength. What transpired? Denise inquired, pulling back to examine his countenance. Are you injured? Johnson met his wife's gaze and observed their daughter, Maya, standing in the doorway, watching. He noticed their son, Marcus Jr., peeking out from behind his sister. How could he articulate to his children that their father, a police lieutenant who had dedicated 17 years to safeguarding others, had been apprehended and incarcerated like an animal because 3 federal agents had perceived his skin tone and determined he was undeserving of fundamental human dignity? I am unharmed, Johnson replied softly. However, we need to converse. Inside the residence, Johnson sat with Denise while the children retreated to their rooms. He recounted every detail, the service station encounter, the agents surrounding him, the presentation of his identification, the deactivation of the body cameras, the racially charged remarks, the arrest, the confinement in the cell, and the 6 hours of being treated as though he were invisible. Denise listened, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. Upon concluding his account, she posed the question that had been tormenting him for 6 hours. Why? She whispered. You showed them your badge. Why would they still detain you? Johnson looked at his wife, his expression conveying 17 years of weariness from perpetually confronting a reality he could never escape. "Because to them," he stated, "I was not a police lieutenant. I was merely a black man, and in their minds, that rendered me culpable of some transgression." The following morning, Rodriguez telephoned Johnson at precisely 7 o'clock. "I am initiating a formal complaint with the ICE Office of Professional Responsibility. But Michael, I believe you require legal counsel. What they subjected you to was not merely improper, it was a criminal act." Johnson contacted a civil rights attorney named Sarah Chen, recognized as one of the preeminent legal professionals in the state. She listened attentively to his narrative and then posed a singular question. "Are you aware if the service station was equipped with surveillance cameras?" 2 days later, Chen's investigator obtained the relevant footage. The silent security video meticulously documented the entire sequence of events. Johnson was shown fueling his vehicle alone. 3 agents arrived and positioned themselves around him. Johnson presented his documents. The agents began to depart. Subsequently, all 3 agents simultaneously reached up towards their chest-mounted cameras before returning to violently apprehend Johnson. The timestamp clearly indicated the duration of the entire encounter. Johnson never resisted, nor did he exhibit any aggressive behavior. He simply stood there while 3 federal agents violated his liberty. Chen also issued subpoenas for the body camera recordings from all 3 agents. The footage revealed Mitchell, Torres, and Brennan approaching Johnson and demanding identification. Johnson presented his driver's license and police badge. The agents examined the credentials, then commenced their withdrawal. The cameras perfectly captured their departure. 3 agents returning to their vehicle, incident concluded. Then, all 3 cameras abruptly went to black at the precise same instant. When the cameras were reactivated 30 minutes later, the agents were shown driving on the highway with no mention of Johnson, no arrestee in their vehicle, and no documentation of the events that transpired during those missing 30 minutes. They deactivated their cameras, unlawfully arrested you, then reactivated them and pretended it never happened, Chen declared. This is not merely racial profiling. This constitutes premeditated deprivation of rights under the guise of authority. That is a federal offense. Chen delved deeper into the disciplinary records of the 3 agents. Derek Mitchell had 11 formal complaints filed against him over a 6-year period for racial profiling. Kevin Torres had 7. Amanda Brennan had 5. A total of 23 complaints lodged against the 3 agents, each of which had been dismissed by ICE supervisors as unsubstantiated. However, Chen uncovered a more disturbing pattern. She subpoenaed ICE detention records for the preceding 2 years and discovered a chilling correlation. Mitchell, Torres, and Brennan had conducted 41 immigration stops within a 24-month span. 38 of these stops involved individuals identified as Black or Hispanic. Only 4 of the 41 stops resulted in confirmed immigration violations. This indicated that 37 American citizens had been detained, questioned, and subsequently released. Chen located as many of these individuals as she could. 12 agreed to be interviewed. Their accounts were remarkably consistent. They had been stopped while shopping, while walking, or while sitting in a park, demanded to produce identification, held for extended periods, and then released without apology or explanation. The majority were too apprehensive to lodge a complaint. Some lacked sufficient English proficiency to navigate the complaint procedures. Others harbored no confidence that a complaint would affect any change. Michael Johnson was simply the first individual with sufficient standing to effectively challenge the situation. Part 4. The Repercussions. Sarah Chin filed a federal civil rights lawsuit 3 weeks after Michael Johnson's apprehension, seeking $11.9 million in damages and requesting a comprehensive investigation into ICE's detention practices. The lawsuit named Derek Mitchell, Kevin Torres, and Amanda Brennan as individual defendants, along with the federal government, for its failure to adequately supervise agents with documented histories of racial profiling. The security footage from the service station was disseminated publicly within days. News outlets across the nation broadcast the silent video repeatedly. The footage depicted 3 federal agents confronting a black man at a gas pump, the man presenting documents, the agents departing, then all 3 simultaneously reaching up to deactivate their body cameras before returning to violently apprehend him. The video garnered 50 million views within its initial week. ICE initially attempted to defend its agents. A spokesperson issued a statement asserting that Mitchell, Torres, and Brennan had adhered to established protocols and possessed reasonable suspicion to detain Johnson. However, Chen subsequently released the body camera footage, which clearly documented the precise moment all 3 cameras simultaneously went dark, effectively dismantling ICE's defense. There was no plausible explanation for why 3 trained federal agents would simultaneously deactivate their recording devices unless they were aware that their subsequent actions were illicit. The Department of Justice initiated a criminal investigation into all 3 agents for law, a federal offense punishable by up to 10 years in prison. The investigation broadened when Chen's research brought to light the pattern of unlawful detentions. DOJ investigators reviewed every single stop conducted by Mitchell, Torres, and Brennan over a 2-year period, and discovered that they had systematically targeted and detained black and Hispanic citizens without justification, holding them for hours before releasing them without charges or documentation. The investigation uncovered an even more disturbing revelation. ICE had been operating under an unofficial quota system that rewarded agents for a high volume of detentions, irrespective of whether those detentions resulted in actual deportations. Mitchell had the highest detention figures in the region and had been repeatedly commended by supervisors for his productivity. No one had ever questioned why 91% of his stops led to the release of innocent citizens. All 3 agents were terminated within 2 months. Derek Mitchell, Kevin Torres, and Amanda Brennan had their federal law enforcement credentials permanently revoked. They would be permanently barred from employment in law enforcement anywhere within the United States. Criminal charges were filed against all 3 for civil rights violations. Mitchell faced additional charges for orchestrating the conspiracy. The federal government, confronted with overwhelming video evidence and a documented history of ignored complaints, settled Johnson's lawsuit for the full $11.9 million after 14 months. The settlement represented the largest payout for wrongful detention in the state's history. As a condition of the agreement, ICE was mandated to implement comprehensive nationwide reforms. The new policy stipulated that all ICE agents would undergo 40 hours of racial bias training annually. Agents were required to possess specific, articulable, and probable cause before demanding identification from any individual. Body cameras were prohibited from being deactivated during any enforcement action, and any agent found tampering with their camera faced immediate dismissal. An independent civilian oversight board was established to review all detention decisions and investigate complaints of racial profiling. The settlement also necessitated that ICE audit its detention records from the preceding 5 years across the nation. The audit revealed systemic issues in multiple regions. 89 agents exhibiting patterns similar to Mitchell's were identified. 67 were compelled to resign. 22 faced criminal investigations. Derek Mitchell's life was utterly devastated. At 34 years of age, he was rendered unemployable in any field related to law enforcement or federal service. He accepted a position at a warehouse earning $14 per hour. His wife divorced him after the video gained widespread attention, and she became known within their community as the wife of the racist ICE agent. He lost custody of his 2 children. The video depicting him deactivating his body camera and assaulting a police lieutenant became an inescapable mark upon him. 5 years later, he was still employed in minimum wage positions, burdened by the notoriety of being the face of ICE's racial profiling crisis. Torres and Brennan experienced comparable outcomes: divorce, unemployment in their chosen professions, and employment in retail and service industries, forever stigmatized by their decision to participate in the unlawful detention of an innocent man. Michael Johnson returned to duty after a month of stress-related leave. The department offered him counseling, which he accepted. His colleagues rallied around him, adorning blue ribbons in a display of solidarity. 18 months after his apprehension, Johnson was promoted to the rank of captain, a recognition of his years of service and his courage in confronting injustice. Johnson utilized a significant portion of his settlement to establish the Rights and Dignity Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing legal assistance to victims of immigration profiling. In its initial 3 years, the foundation aided over 200 individuals, many of whom had been detained by Mitchell, Torres, and Brennan, but had been too intimidated or financially constrained to pursue legal recourse on their own. Johnson also emerged as a prominent national speaker on civil rights and police accountability. He conducted training sessions for law enforcement agencies nationwide on constitutional rights, racial bias, and the imperative of treating every individual with dignity, irrespective of their appearance. His case was incorporated into law school curricula as a landmark example of civil rights violations perpetrated by federal agents. 5 years following his apprehension, Johnson was appointed Deputy Chief of Police. He was responsible for the department's training academy and its community relations division. His daughter, Maya, was now 17 and intending to pursue criminal justice studies in college. His son, Marcus Jr., was 14 and intimately familiar with his father's story, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to the power of advocating for what is right. Derek Mitchell, at 39 years old, continued to stock shelves at a grocery store for $15 per hour, perpetually aware that his racism had cost him everything and provided Michael Johnson with a platform to effect genuine change. The body camera footage of the 3 agents simultaneously deactivating their cameras remained one of the most damning pieces of evidence ever documented of premeditated civil rights violations. It was utilized in federal training programs, congressional hearings, and civil rights seminars as irrefutable proof that some officers are acutely aware of when they are about to transgress the law. The lesson exacted a substantial public toll: $11.9 million, 3 ruined careers, 67 forced resignations, and a complete overhaul of ICE detention policies nationwide. Michael Johnson had been arrested for fueling his vehicle while black. However, his refusal to remain silent exposed a system that had been engaged in the abduction and detention of black citizens for years. Justice had come at a cost of nearly $12 million, but for the 200 individuals assisted by Johnson's foundation, for the thousands of citizens who would no longer face unlawful detention due to the new policies, and for Johnson's own children, who learned that standing up against injustice was indeed possible, the price had been worth the payment. If this narrative has demonstrated that even a badge cannot shield one from racial profiling, please share it with someone who needs to understand that change only materializes when victims resolutely refuse to remain silent. What further reforms could effectively prevent federal agents from targeting citizens based on their skin color? Share your thoughts in the comments section. And if you believe that no one should be subjected to arrest for fueling their vehicle while black, please subscribe, as we are committed to bringing you more stories where standing up for justice entails immense personal cost, yet irrevocably transforms the system.